Let's have a show.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
CYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Very good to be with you. Let's dive right into the news. This afternoon, we had a strange situation between Israel and Lebanon developing amid a series of negotiations that the parliament member of Lebanon, who is part of the Hezbollah terror network. Again, the Lebanese government used to be a Christian country, and then they decided to do that thing where they said, oh, in Islam, it's fine. I mean, come on, look at how great their societies are. That kind of crap. And then Lebanon became a garbage heap that became a hellscape for its citizens. That from the statement of Muslim and Christian Lebanese. And so as members of Hezbollah took leadership, the Iranian proxy terror group, leadership in the Lebanese government, there started to be a couple of problems in southern Lebanon. And so after the Israeli Defense Force moved in, started clearing a couple of things out, people from Israel were allowed to move back into the Golan Heights in northern Israel. Then today, amid a ceasefire, amid this United States and Iran non-negotiations, we started getting a couple of returning to things as normal in this particular war. So first of all, the Hezbollah crews started throwing another round of rockets toward the Israelis. We saw this in a couple of interceptions that started to come a couple of hours ago. If you're watching the live stream, you can see the scene that you've become quite accustomed to, a series of interceptions. Some of the blurring below in the camera footage to kind of keep where that particular footage was shot hidden. And also, Israel responded by throwing a couple of missiles at a couple of the Hezbollah former pickup trucks. Now they're not picking up too much. So that brings us over to the ceasefire between the United States and Iran, because this is something that could be a bit of an issue. If Iran and its proxy networks in Iraq also start throwing missiles back towards Israel, then that stops any chance of negotiation. And the Trump administration right now, holding that blockade, has an opportunity not only to starve the Iranian regime of any kind of financial momentum, any last vestiges of leverage, but also it allows the Iranian regime to fight itself, which is what we're seeing. We're going to get to that here in a second. But the president of the United States, right after it looked like the ceasefire was completely over between Israel and Hezbollah, the president of the United States got out on Truth Social and announced, the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, vice president of the United States, J.D. Vance, secretary of state, Marco Rubio, ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and it lists a bunch of other individuals. Ambassador to Lebanon, Michael Issa, met today with high-ranking representatives of Israel and Lebanon in the Oval Office. The meeting went very well. The United States is going to work with Lebanon in order to help protect itself from Hezbollah. The ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon will be extended by 3 weeks. Now, he says, I look forward in the near future to hosting Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun. It was a great honor to be a participant of this very historic meeting. You know, the whole Truth Social signing the signature at the end routine. So the president says ceasefire is extended because right now, there's a couple of things that are going on the United States really doesn't want touched just yet. So in addition to a series of refueling flights that are still making their way to the Middle East from several bases in Europe, the president of the United States said that he was quite fond with the work that the United States Navy is doing with its blockade. We'll get to some of those details. Here's the president.
What we've done with the blockade is amazing, and nobody gets through. And nobody wants to get through. Nobody's trying. The one tried, they shut out the engine, but nobody's trying. We have complete control. Now they can drop their mines in there and do all those stupid things. It's just going to take longer for them to make money because the mines are going to affect them much more than they're going to affect us.
And that is true, by the way, because the Iranians forget that when you drop mines, you're supposed to anchor them. Because things on the water, they float. If you've ever enjoyed a fun day at the beach with your family and you swam out into the ocean, maybe tried to lie back, float, and kind of rest and relax, if you bobbed back up after a couple of seconds, you may have noticed that the wonderful waves have carried you down the coastline. Well, guys, that happens in other bodies of water too. And when you don't anchor the mines to the sea floor, or at least use some kind of a sea anchor situation in which it dangles down part of the way, and at least holds it as close there as possible. If you just throw them in there like discarded pool floaties, it turns out they move. It's estimated right now that 2 different Iranian mine layer boats have hit other mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, I mean, that's a rough situation for anybody to, hit your own mines, but what the president says there is true. The United States is not just focused, though, on seizing vessels that come up to the Strait of Hormuz. Vessels that are on their way to or from Iran from other countries that may be violating secondary sanction rules by providing some kind of assistance to the Iranian regime, the United States is also seizing. You say, Tony, where have we seen this before? Steve, I'm going to go with Venezuela. So U.S. forces have seized a vessel carrying approximately 1.9 million barrels of Iranian oil in the Indian Ocean, according to U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro on Thursday, that would be today, the 23rd, adding that the operation was carried out under a federal seizure warrant, which is why she's the one reporting it. Quote, overnight, pursuant to a seizure warrant submitted by my office and signed by a federal magistrate, U.S. forces interdicted the Dark Fleet vessel, the MT Majestic, formerly known as the MT Phoenix. It may be Phoenix, but they spelled it incorrectly. So the MT Phoenix, while carrying approximately 1.9 million barrels of Iranian oil in the Indian Ocean. So earlier this week, you may remember, the U.S. forces seized the MT Tiffany based on another one of these seizure warrants. That's another 1.9 million barrels of Iranian oil. So while this is going on, the president of the United States, relating to the situation between not just the U.S. and Iran, but Israel and Hezbollah, has a far better outlook. And while some outlets like PBS is suggesting the president's under the clock and he's going to nuke them, he's going to nuke everyone everywhere, nukes galore. That's not the case. Here was the president making this case today.
The peace between Lebanon and Israel, do you think it will happen this year?
I think it has a great chance. I mean, they're friends about the same things and they're enemies on the same things, and it has to do with, I guess you could say, a couple of countries, but certainly it's, if you look at Hezbollah, that's where everybody seems to be united against them. So they are both very united in that way. I think there's a very good chance of having peace. I think it should be an easy one. Relative to some of the things we're working on, it should be an easy one. But it's been so many years because nobody focused on it. But Lebanon was a great country. It was a beautiful country, smart people, very brilliant people, doctors, professors, economists, some of the smartest people on the planet. But it got torn apart by different factions and nothing having to do with them, outside factors.
Those would be the Iranians. Now, again, a lot happened in this press conference. On this same theme, again, before we get to the PBS reporter who's like, are you gonna nuke everyone? Before we got to that, the adults talked for a little bit longer. Mike Huckabee, again, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, and not only a friend of the show, but a man who has studied a lot of these international relationships between the different Gulf states in the Middle East. His take on this is pretty accurate regarding the relationship between the Israel diplomatic corps and then, of course, the Lebanese government, excluding the couple of parliamentarians, the couple of parliament officials from the Hezbollah organization.
Mr. President, what an amazing opportunity to be here at a moment of history. The people of Lebanon, the people of Israel are neighbors, and they want to get along. They can get along. But it's like neighbors who have a rough little kid living in the neighborhood who keeps throwing rocks at everybody's window. And if the kid will quit throwing rocks, the neighbors can get along and start actually working together.
So that forward, the President of the United States, as there were jets in the air to begin a series of strike packages against the Hezbollah targets near a couple of riverbanks in Lebanon, as that was ramping up, the United States was able to broker an extension of the ceasefire so the United States could continue doing two things. Number one, seizing a lot of vessels and maintaining the blockade as a financial crippling measure to the Iranian regime. And number two, to foster discontent in the Iranian regime to see what best way to effectuate a permanent solution here. We're going to talk about that. Radio crew, we know you have the commercial break to get to. We're going to continue on the live stream without interruption. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So this is, unfortunately, where the adults were finally done talking, and we got a question from a particular member of PBS. This would be PBS Liz Landers, who also happens to be Jim Acosta's girlfriend, in case you were, like grandstanding in the press corps. Anyway, here she is saying, you gonna nuke them and stuff? She started out innocently enough, to be fair. She started out talking about the timeline, and then things got a little interesting.
But sir, is your administration, it's been 8 weeks that the U.S. now has been involved with Iran. You had initially said it would be 4 to 6 weeks.
Well, I hope that, but I also took a little break. I gave them a break. And remember this, I want to make the best deal. I could make a deal right now. Do you know that if I left right now, we had a tremendous success. It would take them 20 years to rebuild, but I don't want to do that. I want to have it everlasting. I want to have it where they never have a chance to get it. I mean, the way you asked that question, I did say it. I thought it would take 4 to 6 weeks, and I was right, because at the end of 6 weeks, at the end of 4 weeks, their military was decimated.
So then she moves forward because the president just answered the question and said, well, yeah, that's exactly what I hoped for. These are the things that went into it. This is what came out of it. And then she followed up with, well, are you going to nuke Iran?
Sir, would you use a nuclear weapon against Iran? You posted on Truth Social a few weeks ago.
We don't need it. Why do I need it? Why would a stupid question like that be asked? Why would I use a nuclear weapon when we've totally, in a very conventional way, decimated them without it? No, I wouldn't use it. A nuclear weapon should never be allowed to be used by anybody.
Now, I mean, hey, hold on a second here. I was told we were going to be dropping nukes and, the world was going to end World War III. Oh, it was going to be the worst thing ever. Completely terrible, awful, all this other nonsense. There are a couple of things of note here, other than, PBS journalists making fools of themselves in the Oval Office. This brings us to some of the information regarding what the United States is trying to attempt right now. We'll get to some of the oil conversation maybe a little bit later. The president essentially said, we're producing lots of oil, more than Russia. Saudi Arabia, lots of oil, lots of it. This brings us to a rather interesting development. According to News 12 today out of the Middle East, the Speaker of the Parliament, that would be Ghalibaf, was rumored to have resigned from the negotiation team to the United States. And this comes after about a week and a half of IRGC officials, including the assumed actual head of Iran right now, IRGC Commander Major General Ahmad Vahidi. The parliamentary speaker, Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf, was someone who wanted to come forward and negotiate a little bit, give up the uranium perhaps, create some type of an off-ramp so that the regime in Iran gets to stay in some kind of power. Because again, the internet has been off now for quite a while. The sentiment in Iran, as the gun-running operations continue and we reach some kind of critical mass situation regarding the population, things are getting a little more difficult for the Iranian regime to maintain power. So an off-ramp sounds like a pretty good deal for them. But the IRGC doesn't feel this way. And so the IRGC decided to, today, supplant any last vestige of President Pezeshkian or the Speaker of the Parliament here. And there was an initial report and then 2 subsequent reports released that the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament had resigned from the negotiation team and that a foreign minister placed by the IRGC is the guy that would be stepping into position. And this is where things got kind of comical. So first of all, you had statements that came out from both the Iranian Foreign Minister Arashi and then Ghalibaf, both saying everything is fine and we are full of unity. We are all so together. And they said it in the exact same phrase in the exact same wording. So it's a really bizarre situation there. It's definitely not over. We're going to bring the radio crew back up from commercial because there's a couple of ending updates on this regarding some current standing orders from the United States. And then we're going to get into some of the nonsense. Don't go anywhere. Lots of news to cover tonight. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Right now, the United States has a couple of standing orders. One of them is that any of the minesweeper little, they look like the DNR Great Lakes little patrol boats. any of those that the United States sees, they're to shoot on sight. The third aircraft carrier is in the region, ready to go. It appears that the United States might be in the stages of getting another operation underway. We don't have a ton of information on that yet. There is a report, according to CNN, you can take this with a grain of salt, quote, U.S. military planners are reportedly developing options to strike Iran's military leaders and other, quote, obstructionists, end quote, within the regime, who the United States officials have suggested are actively undermining negotiations. As a reminder, the negotiation team, including foreign ministers and Speaker of the Parliament, goes to Pakistan, to Islamabad, and they go through a series of negotiations with Vice President J.D. Vance and company. And then they reach some sort of kind of agreement, at least a temporary ceasefire, and trying to work towards a more permanent solution, again, that off-ramp. And then the IRGC says, no, that's not happening. The state media has a heart attack, flipping back and forth like Jasmine Crockett trying to do more than one accent in a day. And then it just all devolves into sheer chaos. And now the IRGC has, again, presumably forced the Speaker of the Parliament to resign from the negotiation team. So the President of the United States seems to kind of be leaning in this way. There was a quoted tweet over on his Truth Social earlier from Mark Thiessen, quote, if there are two factions in Iran, one that wants a deal and one that doesn't, let's kill the ones who don't want a deal. So this is, again, the president does telegraph things weeks in advance. There's not like there's a lot of mystery and mystique to this kind of stuff. But we'll leave that alone for a little bit and go over to some of the wilder backlash from today. So, as you know, Secretary of the Navy Phelan had been fired. Again, reportedly, he was more interested in the giving of orders than carrying out the will of the administration from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, replacing him was former Undersecretary, now acting Naval Secretary, Hung Cao. Now, there was, of course, a lot of weeping and moaning from various officials. For example, Hakeem Jeffries made a very, very big deal here to, go through all of these, terrible, horrible, awful complaints. Oh, I can't believe that the Trump administration would be so cruel, so terrible to get rid of Secretary Phelan and so many competent members of the military. Hakeem Jeffries has never had a kind thing to say about anyone in the administration up until this point. He had been mocking the Secretary of the Army and the Navy appointed by this administration. But now things have changed. You've got to put on a really strong face, I suppose.
What is your reaction to the departure of the Navy Secretary, particularly in the midst of the ongoing Iran war?
Yeah, Pete Hegseth is a complete and total disgrace at this point. And the mismanagement at the Department of Defense is extraordinary. We've lost so many talented, patriotic, skilled, high-ranking officials within our military. And the departure of the Secretary of the Navy is the most recent example. By all accounts, someone who has had exemplary service to this nation, and because of Pete Hegseth's desire to exact retribution on anyone within the Pentagon who doesn't bend the knee to his incompetence, he gets rid of them.
Okay, so a couple of things here for you boys and girls out there who want to know a little bit about how the Pentagon works. Okay, so in the military, there are these things called ranks. You have leadership, you have a structure. And see, the thing that a lot of people don't know is that you really have to do what your commanding officer says, even when you don't like it. And so if you're the Secretary of the Navy, yeah, you are the guy in charge of the Navy. But you're not just in charge of the Navy like some independent king to do with whatever you wish. Oh, no. See, you're supposed to do what the Joint Chiefs of Staff say. You're supposed to do what General Dan Kane says. And he's supposed to do what the Secretary of War says. And the Secretary of War is supposed to do what the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces is supposed to. That's what he says. What he says goes. And then the House and the Senate have some checks against that presidential authority. That's how it's set up. So if you say, hey, look, this is what we need to do with the United States Navy right now. Again, let's make a hypothetical situation. If you say we need to seize any boats that are coming from China to the Persian Gulf that we assume, that we believe are Iranian controlled, that are flying false flags, violating all kinds of law, including the international standards for common maritime law. If Secretary Phelan says, no, I don't like that, I'm not going to do it, well, then goodbye. That's not a stain on your military service record. By the way, this is one of the things that is supposed to keep people from seeking positions of leadership. There's this stupid idea in American culture that people are owed fancy, high-paying positions of leadership. They're owed it. And if they don't get these fancy, high-paying positions of leadership, and just because you disagree with your superior and you don't do what you are instructed to do, you're insubordinate, then that's fascism. The same thing is happening right now regarding the New York Times breaking down and weeping big honkin' crocodile tears over a couple of USAID employees who, again, in the Trump administration, the USAID was a State Department office that existed from the Kennedy administration forward to be a private bribe fund of the president. That is what it is for. You say, well, I don't really like that. It is so that if the Russians or the Chinese go to Colombia or Argentina and say, hey, you want to invest in Russian industry? We build port right here in warm water port, very important to Russia. You build one right here. You give us exclusive access. That's very, very good. The United States, you say, I say you could build a warm water port for the Russians, or you could take this check for $75,000. And also you could go on a date with me and Marilyn Monroe. And that's how USAID was set up to function. You say, well, I think that's really corrupt. Every king, every president needs a slush fund to do some bribery foreign policy wise. That's what it's for. You say, well, Congress should be in charge of that. That's true. But see, Congress is televised via C-SPAN 1, 2, 3, and ESPN 8 the Ocho to the whole freaking planet. So there's no negotiation that happens there that the rest of the world doesn't know immediately. So did the Democrats just leave that there and say, okay, USAID only for some foreign policy negotiations? No. As you know, then administrations like the Obama administration, the Biden administration, started using USAID to fund things like LGBTQ transgender theater camps in South America, or atheism in Nepal, or a special Sesame Street for Iraq, or HIV explanation warning and culture in Who Gives a Crap Africa, whatever. Those kinds of programs. And the American people, and those were revealed by Elon Musk, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, the rightful leader of USAID, especially once the president made sure it was under the direct auspices of the State Department, said, okay, all of you fools who have been making bank off of Americans as these bureaucrats just giving money to whomever, and again, also accused of maybe funding a couple of rather political interests against the United States, cut a lot of things off. And there was a lot of mourning and weeping at the time. And let's look at some of these individuals. Now the New York Times, quote, a year after USAID's death, fired workers struggle to find other jobs. Now, one of these individuals that they cite is a lady who was making over $200,000 a year as a senior something assistant vice president, some Dwight Schrute position, but without the sales. And now the New York Times says she's struggling to, she had an interview for $19 an hour at this spice shop in Virginia. And there are hundreds of these positions that you were paying for. And the argument was you need to pay, even though they have no skills, even though they have nothing of value to add, even though they're not doing anything, even for the State Department's interest for the President of the United States. You just need to give them money. And if you fire them, it's because you hate the civil service or their military service or their super duper busboy service. No. And I say Bradley Devlin, our political editor, said this, even though he and I don't see eye to eye on everything, on kind of some of the right versus right issues. This is one that he nailed. If making a lot of the bureaucracy and the federal workers mad in Virginia is something that caused a lot of them to get out and vote Democrat, yeah, that's worth it. There's no sacrifice that means that we have to be held hostage by those working for federal bureaucracy positions being paid $250,000 a year to sit there and play solitaire when they're not signing a check to transgender camp in Colombia. Radio crew, we'll see you guys on the other side of your commercial break. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We're going to continue here on the live stream. Now, I was talking about the new acting secretary of the Navy, Hung Kao, because after Hakeem Jeffries got done mourning all of the fired people, the Democrats decided to lean into the SPLC "we're the real racist" allegations. Remember that whole Stop Asian Hate campaign during the COVID era, in which the Democrats said, oh man, all of these white people are attacking Asians because Trump said the virus comes from China. And then that turned out to be, dead on accurate true. Well, then that whole Stop Asian Hate campaign by the Democrats stopped after it turned out that 95% of crimes against Asian Americans were coming from black individuals in New York City. 95% were coming from black individuals on camera mugging little old Asian women, like that exact demographic matchup in New York City at ATMs. And then they were like, oh, that hashtag's been deleted. So the Democrats have decided to revive not the Stop Asian Hate campaign, but, they made the decision to fact post, which is like Kamala Harris's little sort of social media project. Remember the whole 6-7 thing that was like awful, the little headquarters thing? Fact post was what became of the Kamala original, like Kamala headquarters account. So this was like her first failed attempt at media. Posted a picture of Hung Kao, who is, I believe, like 5'8", standing next to Glenn Youngkin. Now, I don't know if you ever know this, but like Glenn Youngkin is 6'7". The dude is tall. And so they have Hung Kao standing next to Glenn Youngkin. And they're saying, see, he's really short. And so then the Democrats, the Democrat account said, oh, he's really teeny tiny. Which, first of all, if we're going by the demographics here, again, this is a kid who escaped from Vietnam as a child, came to the United States, and not only a very decorated naval veteran, but they're like, Asians are short. Isn't that's funny, right? Get it? That's a good one. So they were roasted alive for this, as they should be. Because again, Hung Kao is a refugee who fled Vietnam at 4, grew up in Niger, and then went from an enlisted sailor to an Annapolis graduate, which means he applied while he was enlisted. There are not a lot of slots reserved for those who are enlisted to then go to a service academy. He then led the diving team that recovered the body of JFK Jr. And of course, he's a combat veteran with tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the guy the Democrats are going after. Why? Because he's not one of these bureaucrats. And by the way, I didn't have an issue with Secretary Phelan. I asked him questions. He was very direct with me about the Navy shipbuilding program. But now that, he's been fired, Phelan must be elevated as the greatest thing that ever was, and the guy taking his place must be some big, dumb, corrupt idiot. And by doing this, remember they did this back with Mad Dog Mattis, back in the first Trump administration. They've done this with anyone elevated. They did it with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. Any sacrifice made is instantly dragged through the mud for cheap political points. Now, I'm happy to say, very, very happy to say, that this doesn't appear to be kind of the standard run-of-the-mill kind of a focal point. At least the accusations made that the administration is full of corrupt and stupid idiots who are really awful and all that kind of nonsense. The FBI, through Kash Patel, amid, again, this Atlantic piece, he's MIA and he's drunk all the time. I am seeing more reports now, and I've gone back to look at some of the records during the Biden administration and the first Trump administration. This administration has done more counterterrorism efforts that have stopped a lot of these shootings and terror attacks before they've happened than any administration that I've done some of the record searching on in modern history. We're going to talk about that next. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't go anywhere.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So, again, we do something here on this show, here on the Tony Kinnett Cast, that a lot of other shows here and there do not do. And this is, we make it a point, we make it a priority that when there is a situation in which the FBI or law enforcement stops a mass shooting or tragedy, terrorism event, a mass casualty event, before it happens, we make sure to praise law enforcement because, again, it's probably a lot easier and honestly better for the click rate if it bleeds, it leads is the industry standard. So if I'd have led and made it again, it's like, the Baton Rouge shooting and all this stuff, and then ignore all of the things that law enforcement is doing to stop these events that would have been just as terrible, I feel like I'm doing you a disservice. So even if it's not getting all of the clicks, I don't care. We are starting with a major win for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, 2 of these branch offices in Charlotte and in Houston. According to FBI Director Kash Patel, on Tuesday, the FBI received a tip that an individual out of Lexington, North Carolina, was planning a mass casualty event at a Jewish day school near Houston, Texas. The FBI branch offices of Charlotte and Houston acted quickly, and working with our outstanding local partners in the Davidson County Sheriff's Office, the subject has been taken into custody. The investigation is ongoing. Thank you to our Joint Terrorism Task Force personnel, FBI teams, and local partners for their decisive work that likely saved many lives. So right off the top of the bat, I want to say that this administration, when they said they were kind of moving out of the Hoover building, and they were going to put a lot more focus on the different branch offices of the FBI around the country, I said it was a really good move if they could coordinate and celebrate the victories from those offices. If there is one thing that Kash Patel has done better than any other FBI director before him, and again, I have my gripes with Kash Patel. Absolutely, I do. This ain't one of them. He has done a phenomenal job of making sure that those who are doing the actual job of being good FBI agents, stopping crimes, not just fraud, but these mass terror, mass casualty incidents, that kind of work is elevated, is communicated, and they have the resources they need. That is very good. That is rebuilding institutional trust in the FBI. Little by little, bit by bit, but that is doing so. Now, unfortunately, now we must pivot to covering some of the updated information on the shooting at the Mall of Louisiana in Baton Rouge. So this is the second shooting in Louisiana this month. Now, originally, as the information was coming out, there was a lot of really bad, misinformed reporting talking about a guy carrying an AR-15, and it was this big, huge, like a white supremacist shooting. We saw a lot of police officers rolling up to the scene, and all of those rumors and things were not true. And again, I implore you that when these kinds of events are developing, patience is what is necessary. Just because you see some kind of a video or a really choppy bit of photographic evidence that's been hastily uploaded to YouTube, yeah, I mean, that doesn't make it true. So what did we find out again after this particular shooting was reported? Cops were on scene. There were 10 reported injured. And according to the authorities in Baton Rouge, the exchange of gunfire, which by the way now has left 1 person dead, and the update now is just 5 wounded. Again, originally there was an estimate that there were 10 wounded. 5 people are currently in custody, according to Police Chief T.J. Morris of Baton Rouge. Authorities described the shooting inside the mall as a confrontation between 2 groups of people. Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill said that some innocent bystanders were struck by gunfire. That is an awful thing that does happen in a lot of these kind of public confrontations that go sour and the guns come out. Bullets don't stop on any surface. It's not Hollywood. And so that is as is described, a heartbroken, a senseless act of violence. Again, by 2 groups. We don't have any additional information on the 2 groups and what they were fighting about. But essentially, this doesn't appear to have been a targeted, specific shooting. I think we have some other clips here, individuals being carried out on stretchers during, after the situation had ended, after control was restored by law enforcement. This is a report, I believe, from the police a little bit after the event.
Right about 1:22 this afternoon, we got reports of shots fired here at the mall in the courtyard, the food courtyard area. We had a massive law enforcement and medical response come. Thanks to all our responding agencies, everybody from the Sheriff's Office, the St. George, State Police, and even FBI came to help to respond to this. We got here very quickly, secured the scene. No more active shooting going on. We started treating victims until EMS got here. EMS got here very quickly and were able to transport victims away from the scene within minutes. What we found out looking through surveillance videos, it looks like it was kind of a targeted 2 groups of people got into an argument inside the food court and started shooting at each other. Unfortunately, there were some innocent people that were in the area that might have also caused some rounds. Right now, we have 10 victims at local area hospitals, some transported by EMS and some arriving by private vehicle. Definitely, our hearts and prayers go out to all the victims involved in this, various level of injuries, and we're going to keep giving y'all updates as we get them.
That is an absolutely a correct way to address that. Now, over on to, again, we'll bring you updates if we have any of that. Now we must, unfortunately, get to what your congressmen and women are focusing on. Because there's a lot of news that's coming out of Congress as well, because you may remember, we're in the midterm year, and so voters are paying a lot more close attention than usual on what Congress is or isn't doing. So it looks like the government shutdown may finally be coming to a close. Republicans were finally, you know, again, just finally able to get a reconciliation bill funding ICE and Border Patrol out of the Senate and then over to the House for a vote, because that has to be cleared. Now, hilariously, Speaker, or I should say, Senate Minority Leader Schumer took the opportunity to get in front of the American people and complained that, well, you know, I mean, this middle of the night, you know, last minute, no one was here. They snuck it right past us kind of ruling. That's the argument that he came out and tried to make. Here's Senate Minority Leader Schumer.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 48, and the concurrent resolution, as amended, is agreed to. This is the Minority Leader.
Mr. President, tonight, Senate Republicans showed the American people where they stand. Not for families struggling with the high costs of childcare, groceries, gasoline, electricity, but for pumping $140 billion towards rogue agencies.
Okay, so I hear this all the time. You hear this all the time. Instead of focusing on healthcare and focusing on doing things for Americans struggling, they're passing this in 3 a.m. when I should be snuggled up with a dog in the alley. Okay, I hear this all the time. What is your proposal? This is the problem. Again, Republicans have their fair share of issues, and we're going to get to that. Don't you worry. But in the Senate, you got to propose something for voters to want. Just get out there and saying healthcare, education, the cost of living. Great. What are you proposing that through a reconciliation measure? What bills have Republicans slammed down? What have they spiked down into your faces volleyball style? What do you have here? And the answer is nothing. So he just gets up there and he whines for another 2 minutes. I'm not going to bore you with all of the eternal, the whining, the complaining, all that stuff. So this brings us over to the House of Representatives. And Hakeem Jeffries has decided this is his time to shine. Now, he's very scared because it's very likely he's not going to make it as the next House Minority Leader. And if the Democrats retake the House in November, unlikely he's going to be the next Speaker of the House. So he originally came out to do kind of the same whining and complaining that old Chuckles did.
In terms of what's immediately in front of us, legislatively, we're committed to stopping the extreme Republican budget reconciliation bill from passing the House of Representatives.
Oh, so, wow. Boy, that just gets you, doesn't it? That's just like that speech by Denzel Washington in Remember the Titans. Well, that'll wake you up. So no one cares. And by the way, when people point out the polling right now, Republicans are still trailing slightly in the generic congressional ballot for November, but the approval rating for Democrats as well is just in the toilet. It's in the toilet. And a reporter, I believe from CBS, asked, "Hey, what do you say? Even though you're kind of bragging about all this momentum and you're fighting for the American people, why do you think, according to the polling, Americans hate you?" Like, genuine question. And his response is, cringeworthy at best, but at worst, it just makes you want to ram your head into Oscar the Grouch's garbage can.
You got a question there.
Why do voters view Democrats so poorly?
Did your dad?
Oh, sorry. This was, I think, bring your kid to work day. I'm sorry. I thought that was the CBS reporter. I think it's a CBS reporter's kid. Why do voters, view Democrats so poorly?
I'll give you that question. It's a great question in that.
It's a great question. Yes, it is.
I'm going to have words with you after this, Mono. Listen, I think that we exist in an era.
Oh, we're going for the Kamala Harris strategy. We exist in the significance of this moment in time. And, best of luck to you. Best of luck to you. Radio crew will send you guys over to the commercial side of things. We're going to continue on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Now, in all seriousness, Hakeem Jeffries did have a very special moment, a very kind of moment, in which now he's decided that the way to really get some momentum for the Democrats is demanding Donald Trump debate me. Debate me. I demand it.
Since you're talking about Iran, President Trump said there's no time pressure in negotiations with Iran and no time frame for ending the war, even after extending the ceasefire deadline. In the meantime, he launched personal attacks against you, calling you low IQ and labeling your criticism as treasonous. How do you respond both to the substance of his foreign policy approach and these personal attacks against you?
Yeah, if Donald Trump wants to debate me anytime, any place, in the Oval Office, publicly, on camera, I'd be happy to do it. And we'll see who's intellectually superior in that type of contest.
Okay, first of all, slip my wrists. Number two, this is how I gauge my performance whenever I'm on any kind of a debate. If I am waiting between issuing my words and I speak at only a few words of a sentence at a time, then I don't really feel as though I did a good job. Because what people want to hear is concise, clear, understandable, to the point. And then this is where the finesse, a little bit of that dash comes in here. If you can get in a couple of ringers while you are speaking normally, then it really shows that you not only know the issue well enough to communicate on it clearly, but then you can drop in and make it an entertaining venue for the crowd. Hakeem doesn't have this. So again, very, very just kind of attention whoring stuff. Best of luck to him. Now, this brings us to the Senate candidate side of things, because we're in an election season, and the entire role, the whole point of a House leader on the Republican side, Speaker Mike Johnson, on the Democrat side, Hakeem Jeffries in the Senate, whether you're Senate Majority Leader John Thune or whether you are Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, you are the leader who is supposed to get out there and push people towards voting for candidates. But there's a couple of issues, and there are a couple of issues in a couple of states. John Ossoff is having some momentum issues down in Georgia. And then we get over to the Senate elections and the gubernatorial election, for that matter, along with some of the other House race stuff in Ohio. So this would be the Rebecca Downs stuff. We'll have to come back to that in a second. Before I get carried away, good old Senate Majority Leader John Thune. According to our White House correspondent Elizabeth Mitchell, may have gotten caught saying something he really, really shouldn't have said, which could very muchly so, change how some of these Senate elections are going to turn out for Republicans, because what voters want are one thing. They want one thing. They want results. They do. That makes coming out to vote for you worth it, or at least not as awful as it normally is. And so it's very, very frustrating when people are demanding certain things of their politicians, and instead what they're getting is a whole lot of nothing. And the American sentiment right now is that both parties at all times are delivering nothing. We're going to talk about that in the context of Ohio. Don't go anywhere. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
We go over to our Ohio correspondent, Rebecca Downs, here at the Daily Signal. I know there's a lot of chaos going on in our beautiful flyover country. A lot of Senate elections, gubernatorial stuff that's maybe not as narrowed down, fastened down as some might think. Give us the breakdown.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony. It's so good to be on. Yes, as your Ohio correspondent for the Daily Signal. So Ohio has been increasingly a red state, but these midterm races are really going to be ones to watch, right? We have Ohio's first congressional district, the 9th, of course, the Senate election where John Husted was actually appointed. So that triggered a special election. And of course, the gubernatorial race with Republican Vivek Ramaswamy at the top of the ticket. And I will say it really helps that Vivek Ramaswamy Ramaswamy has a lot of money at his disposal, including from himself, because he can help those down ballot races.
Right.
And as red as Ohio is perceived to be, I think that I wrote a column back in July for the site. I really think this is going to be the race that shows, okay, was that just in the era of these Trump elections? Trump won Ohio all 3 times? Or is Ohio really no longer a swing state, but more so a red state now?
It's really going to be a question as to whether or not we're looking at as Ohio goes, so goes the country. As far as the Republican Party is concerned, are they going to drive forward with some candidates that get a lot of momentum? Or are they going to have some issues? I know the gubernatorial, there's been some scrutiny regarding maybe the H-1B visa system and Vivek Ramaswamy, or how he's carrying himself in public. How's that going? I haven't heard much in a while.
So he has acknowledged, I was just at OSU on Tuesday night where he did get a question about that. It was a Turning Point USA event, and that brings out a lively crowd. He has acknowledged that he is not necessarily on the same page as others on that issue. And to be honest, that doesn't really surprise me. You know, we are a big tent party, and I don't want, not that it's not an important issue, but I would say I wouldn't want to let those differences distract us from, there has been a lot of infighting in small pockets of the Republican Party because there is a primary from some lesser known candidates. But it looks like Ramaswamy is going to be the nominee, and let's get him across the finish line, I think, is where Republicans are focused.
Was that kind of his take to the question answer there, that like he acknowledged it, but like, come on, we got work to do?
I don't think he brushed it aside. That's kind of just my reading. I think he did speak to it, but said, you know, he has had disagreements, you know, with other Republicans on that issue.
We're doing a lot of kind of the work on the AI data center stuff as well. Have there been any nods or considerations from either Ramaswamy or Senate candidates on the expansion of industrial or tech policy?
So they recognize that it could be an important issue for Ohio. It's especially a local state issue, but want to make sure that these data centers are paying their own way, want to make sure infrastructure is handled and taken care of, that it's not going to pose a problem for farmland, for energy costs. So it's really a nuanced issue, but still important to Ohio politics that I think could be a bipartisan or even a nonpartisan issue.
Interesting. Kind of last frame here, because again, knowing that you've been following these things around the state, nose to the ground, do you think, just again, in the next couple of years, or really the next couple of months, there are going to be dark horse races or issues that really captivate some national attention? We've seen this in Ohio before. It's just been a couple of years.
I really think it could be. And what you said a moment ago, you know, as goes Ohio, so goes the country. I will say, if John Husted loses that special election, and it is regarded as a toss-up race, which I think might be a little harsh to Republicans right now, it's going to be a bad night for Republicans, no doubt. Ohio 9 is also one to watch. Now, that's Marcy Kaptur. Not only has she been in office longer than I've been alive, she's been in office longer than J.D. Vance has been alive, who's our vice president, who's older than me. So I think that will be a race to watch, because she almost lost re-election back in 2024. Derek Marin came within 0.7%. They have now redistricted that district to make it more favorable to Republicans. If that kind of arrangement does not boot Marcy Kaptur out, I don't know what will. And I do want to make clear, especially if there's all this redistricting, gerrymandering battle, Ohio had to redistrict. It was mandated. The maps were not. Yes,
it was that expiration
the maps were not going to hold up. And for people that say, "Oh, we should have," Republicans should have gone for a stronger map for fellow Republicans. If Democrats did not agree to it, it could have gone to a referendum. And I know you've talked about referendums and how much you're not a fan, and it might not have helped Republicans. The thing I am concerned about, I will say, when it comes to the map and, is it worth it for Republicans? Another seat that was redistricted to make it more favorable to Republicans is that Ohio 1 race, where Greg Landsman, he might be perceived as a moderate, but he has talked a lot of smack about the Save America Act and his state's own voting system that he's lashed out against. The race was supposed to be redistricted to be more favorable to Republicans, and Cook Political Report has made that a lean Democrat race. Now, it looks like the nominee there is going to be Eric Conroy. The other potential top contender, Steve Urbeck, just dropped out, but Eric Conroy got that Trump endorsement. It looks like he's going to really be fighting this battle for the general election, and that will really be the race to watch. It could be a nail biter, that one.
Excellent. Thank you very much for keeping us up to date.
Thank you so
on
much.
that. Rebecca Downs, Daily Signal's Ohio correspondent, the Maxine Waters of the Midwest, Marcy Kaptur. This might be the end of her particular reign. Thanks for giving us a couple updates.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to cut over just a little bit here before we're kind of done with our broadcast hour side of things to talking a bit about the bizarre, and I'm sorry, I mean truly the most bizarre style of events that could occur. Last night, the California gubernatorial primary, it was something. It was a real primary. Boy, was it. I'm so confused that when you are hemorrhaging over 10 million people since the year 2010, in the last 16 years of the Democrats' rule, I am beyond shocked that the Democrats, in pitching all of their different candidates forward, would get up in front of Sheriff Bianco and then the current leader of that race, Steve Hilton, and just suggest Gavin Newsom is great. What we need to do is go even harder. And that's just what they did. I'm still bewildered by it. I don't think I've ever seen any kind of a race turn out like this regarding this jungle primary. We will see the folks over on the radio side later. You guys take care. We're going to continue on the live stream. Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Take care. All right, now that they are well and away, one of the great examples, first of all, to understand some of the individuals in this particular jungle primary for California. After Eric Swalwell dropped out because, well, you know, a lot of really shady, creepy, date rapey allegations that got much worse very quickly. You had a couple of individuals that strived to kind of come forward and take the stage. So first of all, you had a couple of questions that were just beyond strange regarding things like homelessness. And then, of course, truckers not having to speak English, which, again, given that that's caused a lot of accidents from foreign truck drivers who do not speak English, just a really bizarre debate. Because what you're trying to pitch to Californians right now, again, those who are still around, you're trying to convince people that you're normal, you understand what's going on, you know, you got to get out there and make some claims, you got to get out there and try to impress people with a plan that you have. And we didn't see any of this. So Katie Porter, who's very famous as a congresswoman for berating her staff, being cruel to her staff, throwing boiled mashed potatoes at people, she was asked about, well, shouldn't truck drivers in this country have to speak English? This was the debate hosted by Nexstar. Here was her response to this. It's very, you can tell just the way that I've never been this confused watching people humiliate themselves.
Porter, same question. Do you believe that English proficiency, language proficiency should be strictly enforced for truck drivers? You have 60 seconds.
I would absolutely fight the Trump administration because the job of the California governor is to protect Californians. And right now, that includes protecting them from Donald Trump. Protecting Californians also includes enforcing traffic laws. And we've seen sometimes a need for oversight in California. For example, we have seen that the Department of Motor Vehicles was not enforcing rules around DUIs and drivers who had convictions for that. I am stunned that Mr. Bianco would say to black and brown Californians and immigrants who are being terrorized and racially profiled that you have to get over racism. It's not something that you get over. It's something that you fight. And if,
by the way, he did not say that you have to get over racism. That's not a thing at all that he said. But, you know, Katie Porter is an idiot.
He doesn't understand the importance of that. He has no business representing a state with the diversity of California.
Ms. Porter, thank you very much. Mr. Bianco, I'll give you 15 seconds to respond.
Yeah, again, that's not even close to what I said. What I said is we're Californians, and I'm speaking for them, especially from law enforcement. When I deal with persons of color every single day, Californians are absolutely sick and tired of our politicians making race the basis of everything.
That's correct. So this was echoed by a lot of the different candidates. And there's a question as to who's going to replace, who's actually going to get out there and replace Eric Swalwell. So there were some polls, kind of, that were coming forward to suggest that maybe Eric Swalwell was in the lead. And again, I say things got really weird in the polling. So this morning, I did a hit on News Nation about this, kind of in the follow-up. Here were my notes for that particular hit. And there were a couple of things that I found really interesting subjecting myself to this footage, which is probably why I'm still so shocked. I watched this debate late last night, and I was just, it was like an episode of Whose Line Is It Anyway? It was embarrassing. So after Eric Swalwell was finally out of the race, right, there was one final poll that was done from April 14th to the 15th. And in that particular poll, Republican Steve Hilton, who you're going to hear from in a minute, he is leading with 17 points. Right now on the media side of things, you're hearing like none of that. None of it. It's really embarrassing from like a journalistic perspective. So then, who is in second place? It was a tie with billionaire Tom Steyer, the billionaire man who's like, you need to tax me more, tax me more. And then in the debate, the only thing he said was, I'm an agent of change. I'm an agent of change. So I haven't seen debating strategy that bad since Republicans started using Hathaway strategies out of Chicago. Just awful. But anyway, then you had Sheriff Bianco. He's in second place with 14. We are still in a place where in the jungle primary rules of California, no, that's not a racist term, Katie. In the jungle primary rules of California, the top two candidates voted for in the primary, regardless of party, those are the two choices on the ballot in November. So it is very, very, very possible right now that based on the candidates that are here in front of us, that you could walk away with two Republicans to choose from for the gubernatorial. Now, that would be a wild, very, very wild time in office because still the California legislature will be very heavily Democrat, but it would certainly be interesting. Now, in the meantime, who's in third place? Katie Porter and then Xavier Becerra. Xavier Becerra, you may remember because he is a former Health and Human Services Secretary. And he is also the Attorney General of California, or a former California Attorney General. And a former congressman as well. So he got asked a couple of questions like, hey, did you know about Eric Swalwell's, Bill Cosby and all of the ladies around him? And his response to that was something akin to, there were rumors that he was flirty. Again, I've said this before, I'm going to make this clear again. Guys, normal people don't talk like that. When we spread rumors, we do a little bit of gossip, We're going to do a little Miss Clara in the back of the church. You give the substances, the spicy. That's what the rumor, the gossip is. So the rumor would be, oh, hey, by the way, this person is sleeping with the secretary. This person is trying to get with a bunch of staffers. This person is looking the other way on this. This person is taking foreign money. That's the rumor side of things. Okay? And I've told you this before. I mean, there are rumors about all kinds of different organizations and different clubs, characters. You have those in your life as well. All right? So no one said, you know what? I heard through the grapevine that he's kind of flirty. He's kind of a flirt. No one does that. So that didn't stop Becerra, though, from coming forward after this particular debate and running a huge victory lap. A huge victory lap. So he did a couple of things. First of all, he gave Gavin Newsom an A on homelessness. One of the questions that was asked was, hey, how do you think that Newsom did, facing homelessness in the state of California? And then a bunch of the Democrats gave grades ranging from A to B because, they're all suck-ups and simps. And Becerra is essentially just going to try to be Gavin Newsom 2 or 3.0. So one of the things that he got out there and promised was that he was going to freeze utility rates and home insurance premiums. Just like Mamdani, he's just going to snap his fingers and then presto, it'll be wonderful and amazing and incredible. Oh, what a wonderful time. And that's not how it works. You and I know that that's not how it works. And also, he came forward to tell us all, he is also going to protect the truckers who do not speak English. So this is, again, he's doing the exact same line.
Should the CHP be giving English proficiency tests to truck drivers? And if not, would you as governor push back against the Trump administration on this policy? You have 60 seconds.
I would definitely push back on the Trump administration on, again, a reckless policy. I would make sure that officer understands that he cannot discriminate against any driver without having a basis to do so. I understood a little bit of what that individual was trying to say. I couldn't see the signs, but it certainly sounded like he was trying to describe what that particular sign was trying to represent. And so we have to be very careful that we're not profiling consumers in California.
Oh my. So his argument as to why we shouldn't require truck drivers in the United States to speak English is that one of the foreign truck drivers, and again, it is not about the fact that in many of these cases, the truck driver happens to be a shade of tan. It's not. Because it doesn't matter whether he speaks Spanish only, or he speaks Hindi, or he speaks Farsi, or he speaks Russian, or he speaks French. It doesn't matter. If you don't speak English, you can't read the signs. And I know that there are some of you out there in the wide beyond who believe for some reason that the only letters on the road are the S, T, O, and P in the stop sign, and that everything else is a bunch of arrows and lights. But the rest of us Americans who actually do drive, who actually do get behind the wheel of our little Toyota Corolla and putt around the greater United States, there are a lot of signs, including signs that have particular warnings on them, 2 or 3 word statements of what you can expect, but also, and this is my personal favorite, on the interstate, there are these really big signs that they put. Some of them are on those orange metal trailers. Some of them they mount, especially on major interstate thoroughfares, your 3-letter interstate loops that are going around major cities, because there just happens to always be a lot of need for custom messages from the Department of Transportation about all kinds of hazards. Lane closures, slowing down, obstruction, police ahead, construction ahead, details about a new traffic pattern, things that you need to be aware of on certain reports. And if you can't read, you've seen them, the black sign, and it has the orange/white lettering, and it's not even really LEDs. They're those old style, I say old style, please don't hurt me. I'm just a wee millennial at the age of 30. But those smaller light bulb signs, not quite to LEDs yet, you know what I'm talking about. Christmas lights on steroids. Those signs are in English. They're in English. And so what the former Health and Human Services Secretary and the California Attorney General is trying to make the case of is, well, he was like trying to explain what was on the sign to the police officer. So that's why you should get to drive. My dude, he ignored the signs and then caused an accident that cost the lives of American citizens. It doesn't matter if he's going, oh, you know, you look at the sign, the letter, N means no to the left, to the right, izquierda, por cuevas, no, claro que sí. No. Has nothing to do with the fact that the dude may be Hispanic or from a Central or South American country. He could be speaking Castilian Spanish. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether he's speaking whether he's speaking Romanian, whether he's doing the clicks of the Zulu. If you don't speak the language of the country you're in, you should not be able to participate in a high-risk, high-impact trade. Of course, we've talked about that before. So there were a lot of wild things, just so many wild things. At one point, Tom Steyer didn't like what Steve Hilton was saying, and so he gave him a little bit of a shove. And they're just chock full of weird clips from that debate.
Clarification, English proficiency, 15 seconds. Exams?
The DMV has exams, and it's not about whether...
This is Mahan or McMahon. This is a low polling guy. He's answering the question the same way.
Or not you speak English. I represent one of the most diverse cities and the safest city. What the DMV is responsible for doing is not testing how good your English is. It's whether or not you're a safe driver who understands the rules.
Good luck with this. Good luck with this. It was just full of nonsense, and we might find a couple of clips to play later. We've interviewed before he ran for governor, or at least early on in his campaign, Steve Hilton. And then, of course, even though that was way early in the primary process, per FCC rules and nonprofit rules, we absolutely reached out to the other candidates, every single one of them, including Feel 'em Up Eric Swalwell, to make sure that we invited them on the show. But that's California's problem. At the United States Senate level and at the federal government level, what the rest of the media is focusing on is pretty much a blend between the increasingly horrible revelations coming out of the Southern Poverty Law Center and the agitprop campaigns that have been going on for years, coupled with some really disappointing nonsense out of the Senate Majority Leader's office from John Thune. So I've been alluding to that this weekend. We're going to talk about that with Wade Stotts here for a second, the Wade Stotts Wade Show with Wade. Really great stuff. Again, thank you guys very much for joining us this evening. We'll come back after that interview and talk a little bit about the Virginia state senator, who he knows rural Virginia because he's watched the Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah, you impressed? I thought so. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Stick around.
Yes, Tony, the SPLC did bad things.
Hey, welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We're joined by the legendary Wade Stotts from The Wade Show with Wade. He's been here before, all that stuff in the description. Now, I don't know if you know this, but though we be two white bearded conservatives in glasses in our 30s, I regret to inform you, the SPLC has never tried to pay us to be informant Nazis, at least me. I mean, do you have a hidden Southern poverty law hood somewhere in the closet?
No, sadly, I just got my sort of got my Wade Show with Wade mug. If anybody wants to pick one of those up, that's how
Very nice.
And Canon Plus subscriptions, that's how I get funded.
See, I like that. That's the good stuff. And also because Canon Plus, Canon actually puts out where they're getting their money from and what they're doing with it. Again, I know this is a crazy idea. All of the gaslighting that's currently going on in the major media where they're saying, well, they were just, paying informants. Everyone does that. I mean, Wendy's probably has people, informants in McDonald's right now, that kind of thing. They do realize you're federally required as a nonprofit to say how you're spending your money and where you're getting it from.
Yeah, it is wild, honestly, because it allows these people to, the idea is, okay, this is just a small part of their budget. They are doing the work that they say that they're doing. Well, but the small part of their budget is creating the enemies that they are fighting. So they're building their own enemies so that they can have something to market on. Yes, and yes, of course, marketing costs are going to be a small sliver of your overall expenditures. But maybe you should not set up a shell company for your marketing expenditures. That's sort of my thought.
Hang on a second here. Is that the new line? Because the line is changing about every half an hour now. It was like the original Iran war stuff. Is like every half an hour the line was changing. It's like, oh, they're actually winning because now what we've got is no, they were just paying for marketing. Yes. Remember when you started the Wade Show with Wade and you're like, we need a marketing agency. Mm-hmm. Hey, does anybody know how to burn a cross? Like what?
Yeah.
Right. Marketing.
Well,
my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's how they're saying it, but
it's just
I
product
also
research. We need to see how well people are responding to the different types of white supremacy.
Well, and you and I, we started our shows. We do what we do. We talk about politics because the left exists as a threat, and so we have the sort of we're in the positive, good position of having an actual enemy to fight and not having to create enemies with our sort of hidden shell companies. So. I actually appreciate our position in this.
So I'm, again, looking at this kind of stuff. One last take that I wanted to get, and I've seen a little of this, a little bit scattered across the internet. This is essentially the plot from The Incredibles.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right. So Syndrome, the villain.
I invented weapons, and now I have a weapon that only I could defeat.
And it ends with him building a robot to destroy the city that he would then destroy, and then everyone would worship him as the big hero. That's the SPLC, and just as annoying as Syndrome.
Well, what's interesting about this that is not necessarily The Incredibles is that the enemies, the people that are getting paid by the SPLC or people like that, think of themselves as being the ones that the regime truly fears. We are the true resistance. But what this shows, it doesn't show that the SPLC has funded every single left wing or every single uber right wing organization or group or activity. What it does show is that sort of thing does serve their purposes. They are not afraid of these types of people. But what they're not doing, though, what the people they're not donating money to is TPUSA. They're not donating to the Daily Signal. They're not donating to people who are doing real work, and that is an actual kind of threat to them. They donate to the clowns and then say, okay, well, now I'm going to associate that clown, set that clown alongside the Daily Signal, alongside Turning Point USA, alongside The Wade Show with Wade. These people are serving their purposes, and that's the real lesson here.
There's one, I guess maybe now it's a totally different, we've moved past this point that they were making, but one of the other arguments they were making as to why this was all okay, they said, paying informants, everyone does this. And I had to stop. I was actually about 5 a.m. this morning. I was lying awake, getting ready for a media hit that I was a little early in the morning for. And I sat there and thought, wait a minute, if they're saying that everyone is doing this, all of these other left-wing activist organizations, are they also paying various groups? Oh my gosh, Antifa really is a cobbled together group of all of these, or, you know, all of it really does fit this. Well, aren't you doing paid agitation? We are. The very thing we were accusing them of for years, some of us colloquially, some of them very on the nose. And they're like, wait a minute, you guys didn't know everybody's doing this. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, SPLC, it does show, okay, well, then that's the tip of the iceberg. So let's go for the ADL next, right? These other, if everybody says,
saying
everybody
much
does
better
this,
than I am, yes.
If everybody does this, then great. We get to go find all of those people committing crimes as well. Wonderful. Wonderful for our side.
So moving on a little bit here into some of the rest of the news, because the gaslighting is, in fact, all around us. On the Senate side, our Elizabeth Mitchell, excellent over at the Daily Signal, she's our White House correspondent. She got quite the scoop today that I couldn't help but throw over your way just to get your reaction here. So according to our Elizabeth Mitchell scoop, Leader John Thune, the Senate, encouraged his fellow Republican senators to stop talking about one of President Trump's priorities, nuking the filibuster. After a few moderates at the Senate's Wednesday steering lunch urged Republican conference not to talk about nuking the filibuster, Thune agreed that the move lacks the necessary support in the current conference. Two sources familiar with the matter told Elizabeth at the Daily Signal.
Yeah, the whole idea of, okay, well, hey, we can't do that. We can't even talk about doing that sort of thing because then our enemies might get mad and the squishes on our side might get mad. That is, you are the squish that you are trying to market to. It's not saying that the broad appeal to the public would be a problem. It's not saying that we wouldn't get any kind of, that would get struck down or that would, somebody would have okay, well, what your job is as the leader, right, is to gather support for the things that, yes, the Trump.
Isn't there some annoying child song about following the leader wherever he may go? A T-dum, a T-D kind of a thing? I mean,
I'll
come
have
on
to
now.
look that up. It sounds like a classic. But there's a different sort of leadership that's just trying to find everybody that sort of most sensitive person in the room and make sure that that person feels loved and heard, which is very different from having an agenda, knowing what you're there to do, and then accomplishing that agenda. Sounds like John Thune is the former kind of leader.
There's one last kind of thing I wanted to bring up to your attention here, and it's kind of a personal reflection. So one of the things that I know that both of our shows do, other than the excellent cultural commentary and looking devilishly handsome while doing it, is also wearing basketball shirts while, you know, your business professional up top. There is a third thing. We read a lot of our own comments. I know that you also, you can't help it. You look through a lot of the feedback that you get, and a lot of people accuse us of making the news funny. I want to be very clear. They're wrong. We don't make the news funny. It is inherently hilarious at how stupid the national discourse around politics is, how the news is presented. It is inherently hilarious. And if you do not laugh, you will fall into major depression very quickly, because you could not film today's politics as a believable cold open for 2007's The Office.
It also serves as a great weapon against our enemies. So our enemies, the thing that they want the very most is to be taken seriously. And that's the worst thing that you can do for them. So
Arrested Development, we demand to be taken seriously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what they want. They want to be seen as, oh no, I am a man in a woman's body or a woman in a man's body. And then making fun of that does take away any of the mystique, any of the, if they don't have the sort of solemn face, then they have nothing.
Right.
Then if they can get you to make that face, if they can get you amped up, then they've won at some level. Because
then they can get you to say, stop talking about nuking the filibuster.
Oh yeah, if they can manipulate you emotionally into having a very somber face about their ridiculously, then yeah, they've won some pretty big points. So laugh at them. It's fun.
I know you're not supposed to do this as, a show host, but I don't care. You should go watch The Wade Show with Wade. It's good. We have a link in the description. Go buy a Wade, show for Wade mug. or go wade into a Wade Stotts mug. We also maybe at some point have merch coming. I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to write Tony on a Post-it note and slap it on a Starbucks cup, and we'll call it a day. Who knows? Wade, you're the best, dude. We love having you on.
Thank you. And I'll be the first order on that Tony Starbucks cup. I'm excited.
You got it. Coming 2037, 1st of October.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Really quickly here before we go over to Molly Hemingway from The Federalist, who has a truly, truly phenomenal take on the Supreme Court and the number of things that they're currently working on. I wanted to take a quick second to talk a little bit about one of the worst decisions that I have seen in a very, 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 very long time. And this comes courtesy of the Virginia state legislature. So the Virginia Supreme Court is expected to hear the case regarding the Virginia awful, horrible, stupid redistricting constitutional amendment here pretty soon. A lot of people are trying to make a lot of bets as to how the court's going to rule. Of course, we played the clip from Scott Jennings' show over from Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General of Virginia, kind of walking through why he believes that's going to get tossed out because of how the ballot question was worded. I did, again, when you have an entire policy that is built on the idea that you have to be, it's all about fairness. And when you're in state legislature, this idea that what you need to do is sympathize and think about if there are people out there that you know that don't like you and you disagree with you, instead of saying they disagree with me, I disagree with their philosophy, I think they're wrong here, but then kind of finding common ground, there's this weird tendency in politics to patronize people. And it kind of comes out of this Hollywood liberal media idea that because you've seen some TV or heard some songs about this group of people that you don't have a lot in common with, that you understand them. So you're like, I know a lot about Hispanic culture, and that means that you go to Mexican restaurants and you order with an accent. You're like, yes, hi, I'd like the nachos con queso, like that kind of a thing. You see the same thing with, at least in the case of this Virginia Democrat, Virginia State Senator Lamont Bagby, saying, look, I know that a lot of rural Virginians are upset about the redistricting thing and us lumping almost all of rural Virginia into one congressional district, but I understand them. And I understand them because, I've watched a lot of the Dukes of Hazzard and stuff.
And listen, I almost took issue with the other side saying that we don't understand. But I grew up watching the Waltons. I grew up with Opie. I even watched
Opie, the Andy Griffith Show.
The Dukes of Hazzard. I think I know a little bit about rural America.
Now, what you hear, again, this is recorded from a screen, watching the event. You hear a lot of people groaning and laughing at this man. And here's why. I can do this a couple of ways. So I can do this in the kind of 20 teens way of going, imagine if a Democrat had done it. So imagine a Republican. Imagine Senator Kennedy from Louisiana getting up before Congress and saying, I know a little bit about the inner city people because I watched that movie Friday, you just got knocked the freak out. I know a lot about the inner city culture because I watched Friday. Yeah, I mean, he would be roasted for that. He would never say that. That would be a wild thing to say. Suggesting that you understand rural America because you watched The Waltons. You do realize that when we go to sleep, I'm not going, good night, John boy. No. And Andy, as much as I'd love to see Barney Fife, that's not actually how deputies in the rest of the country, not just Mayberry, that's not actually like how that plays out. You realize that, Boss Hogg and, Sheriff Coltrane, like that's not real. Like Smokey and the Bandit guys, that was a fantasy. That's not. It hurts. It hurts a little bit. These are your legislators. I do take a lot of issue with that, but I say that honestly, though, as a comfort. There are a couple of comforts I want to leave you with because it's been a really exhausting week. This is my last show for the week. There won't be a show Friday, not because I'm giving up on you or because I'm tired, but because there is one of you who has been really, really rude. No, there is in my home county of Henry County, Indiana, where I grew up. I have, after all of these years, been invited back to speak at the very last Lincoln Day dinner for the Indiana Republican Party before the primary. The primary is at the beginning of May. And it's a really cool honor to be asked to go back to the home county, the place you grew up, the place that you, like all true athletic studs, competed in a couple of speech competitions when he was in high school. Yeah. I know. You should, in fact, be impressed. But to go back there, I'm doing that tomorrow evening. And to be honest with you, I think this has been a hectic and a crazy enough week. So heaven knows there's probably going to be something that breaks over the weekend. But if it's on Saturday, I'll be in Washington for the White House Correspondents Association dinner, the very first WHCA dinner that Trump has attended since Barack Obama told Trump in 2011 that he wouldn't be president. So I'll be at that table with Elizabeth Mitchell, again, the one who got the scoop on Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who wants you to, don't talk about the filibuster. That guy. So I did get one comment about, we kind of heard Wade Stotts' opinion on the John Thune decision. What do you think about it? Just in case you thought maybe I didn't agree with our dear friend Wade. And I do have an answer. I actually posted this afternoon, but I'll share it over with you fine individuals. I really don't care for the idea of suggesting we're not going to pass anything at all and then forfeiting any chance at winning the midterms because you're scared of Lisa Murkowski and that one senator from Utah that no one knows or likes. So not Mike Lee, but the other one. That's not leadership. So that would be my take on that one to answer your question. So, again, I'm just going to say there are a couple of good things, though, at the end of this week as we kind of round out. Again, I know there are some things that are rather frustrating and some things that are distressing, perhaps. You're just annoyed at politics in general. There's been a lot of gaslighting over the Southern Poverty Law Center, for sure, as we just talked about. However, a couple of really good things. First of all, there are a lot of rural Americans who were riled up by some of these special elections that they saw as disenfranchising them. And fairly so. A republic must be tended constantly by the blood of patriots and tyrants, but also the steadfast conviction and the constant attention. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, of each individual citizen. And I'm encouraged, especially by reading a lot of the comments and a lot of you out there over on those who email in, those who leave comments after the show, and those in the Discord. There's a link to our Discord in the description where you can chat with us any time of day or night, much to my regret. There's a lot of individuals treating their citizenship with a lot more affection and consideration than I've seen in a very, very long time. And that's a very good thing. So that would be number one. Number two, I would like to remind y'all that it is still several months out before the election. I see a lot of people saying that we got to make sure that everything that we do in office shouldn't be about whether it's right or wrong, but based on whether or not it's going to help us win another election. No, being a people pleaser is not the way to do things. If we're doing the people pleasing thing, then every one of my thumbnails for the show would be and trying to clickbait you into things, which I do not try to do. And I'm not throwing shade at anyone in specific. I'm throwing shade at 99% of other content creators on this platform. So you could, people pleasing, hey, it's good that you actually have a guy that's saying, I don't really care. They think I'm up against a wall, but it's the Iranians up against a wall, and I'm going to cut off their gonads and throw them to the streets. I mean, there's something that indeed is, I find a bit of affection for. Same with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. The last thing that I am deeply optimistic about is the Supreme Court of the United States. You say, but Tony, John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, they can be disappointing. Brett Kavanaugh, what do you have to say? What about the other justices and things? Hang on. There is a new book out by Molly Hemingway. She has been doing a lot of excellent media interviews. You can tell Molly's a pro at this. She's the editor-in-chief of The Federalist. because every single one of the interviews that she's done on this new book that she's written on Samuel Alito, an unsung hero of the Supreme Court, every single one of those interviews are different. Because what I'm seeing right now is a new level, a new kind of leadership in the conservative movement. Not that she's new, but I'm seeing a re-taking up of the flag, of the banner, and neither hopelessly just clinging to principles just for principle's sake, and also not just being a people pleaser. And we've got a really great conversation with Molly. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Probably one of the best of these kind of conversations that we've done in a while. And again, if you're looking for something for the end of our shows this week to really hang your hat on as an uplifting thought, this is the thing to do it. So you've heard us cover all of the Supreme Court cases that, you guessed it, it's going to be another summer and fall and then a following year of just crazy cases going before SCOTUS. So you should probably know a little bit about some of the justices making these big decisions. And no, I'm not talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson's Crayola sketches. Instead, how about a little something on Alito? Molly Hemingway, dear friend, and also the editor-in-chief over at The Federalist. Good to have you. Congrats on the new book.
It's great to be here with you.
Well, let's dive right in. Alito is not necessarily as loudly discussed as Clarence Thomas is, kind of on the right social media sphere, at least in kind of the last year. But some of the most to-the-point critiques in some of the court's decisions have come from Alito's pen. And then, of course, the oral arguments speak for themselves. Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, that's a big reason why I wrote the book. Everyone knows about Justice Scalia, and rightly so. Mm-hmm. He's the father of originalism. Everyone loves Justice Thomas, rightly so. He's one of the most amazing Americans we've ever known. But nobody knows anything about Justice Alito, even as his own colleagues say he's the most brilliant person on the court, that he's a giant on the court, that he's the one who handles all of the really big, tough opinions. And I just thought this was like, this person needs to be known more about, and conservatives in particular need to understand more about this person who's delivered for them so many of their victories.
And, you know, just to frame this up, this is the guy when you hear 2, 3, 4, 5 day news cycles based on one comment in the Supreme Court, like, why do we have elections that aren't on election day? Those kind of comments come from Samuel Alito on the bench when we're talking oral argument stuff. And this man also isn't afraid to kind of roll up the sleeves and, you know, tussle it out with Elena Kagan or Ketanji Brown Jackson, things like that as well.
Well, I'm not sure anyone really finds it worthwhile to tussle with Ketanji Brown Jackson. You even saw Elena Kagan had kind of had enough recently, writing in one of her opinions that, you know, what Ketanji Brown Jackson was doing was not really the law. But yes, Kagan and Alito are widely considered the best at oral argument. They're able to figure out the type of question that just completely changes the way people are looking at a case, that strips away what's extraneous from what's at the heart of how they think the case should be decided.
Right.
And when Alito says something in oral argument, 9 times out of 10, it ends up in the final decision or dissent as one of the key issues. So he's a natural talent at that.
So this is one of the things that I wanted to kind of dive into. I haven't seen a lot of the other interviews that you've done on this book cover. There's a list of requirements that the average American thinks should go into a judge at any level, you know, much less the Supreme Court. And Alito seems to have some of the greatest respect for knowing the material. That man reads. I mean, I don't even think Lin-Manuel Miranda could do justice in, you know, kind of describing how avidly and aggressively he's dug through every state and Commonwealth constitution, every single court and ancillary document going into the case. Where does this come from? I mean, this kind of a hunger is like once in a generation.
It also relates to his particular jurisprudence. So you look at a Scalia or a Thomas, they're much more likely to decide a case on the philosophy.
Right.
They have the principle and they stick to it. And for Thomas, he knows what the law should be, and he doesn't really care if anyone else is with him on it. He just says, here's where we should be. Justice Alito is much more pragmatic and much more likely to decide the case that's before him based on the facts before him. And it does create some differences from his other constitutionalist colleagues, even on things like free speech. You might remember there was the case of what's called Westboro Baptist Church, not really a church, but they would roll around harassing families.
Believe me, as a Baptist, we that whole thing is, yes.
Well, it's infuriating. And the court really wanted to decide it based on this pure principle of free speech. He looked at the facts of the case. He was the lone dissenter and saw that the way that they had understood the case based on the actual factual record was incorrect. They said, you have the right to say whatever you want. Well, they weren't doing that. They were targeting an individual and his family in very specific ways that are a violation of various statutes. He would have ruled more narrowly. He's a free speech enthusiast, but on this case, he would have ruled more narrowly for the matter at hand. This family was being harmed in ways that violated the law.
This is one of the things that's going to be coming up in a number of cases, not just regarding certain defamation lawsuits, of course, being brought up from Colorado up to the Supreme Court, but there is not a 0% chance that we might see this series of redistricting measures and how these referenda are phrased, like Facebook terms and service agreements. And I think that when you look at how Alito parses the actual cases before him, you don't get kind of the ethical, I believe things should be this, but here's what you actually did, here's what you didn't do, and we're going to lay that bare before the United States. It's a lost art.
It is. And Tony, you could kind of pick this up in some of the recent cases dealing with algorithms put out by social media companies. Much of the court just wanted to treat it like it was as simple and clear as a 200 years ago case of freedom of the press. And he's willing to ask questions
grapples.
Are we sure that the algorithmic functions are the same as an editorial function? Should we investigate that more? Doesn't mean he necessarily knows where he's going to land, but he's more willing and eager to handle the complexity of cases rather than just appeal to broad philosophy.
There's something that I've been wanting to pitch to you for a long time, because I know that the Federalists, you guys grapple with major issues as an institution. It's one of the reasons that you guys were awarded the Dow Prize. It's this singular focus on tackling tough issues and looking at them from every angle. Do you think that there are, sometimes when we look at the modern populist movement, there's an emotion-driven kind of the ethical argument. It needs to be here, so maybe we don't wrestle with it. We're just going to go for it. And then the technocratic kind of establishmentarian who spends all of their time in the weeds, and they never actually make an ethical argument. Do you think that Alito might be a good representation of the bridge between the two, that actually recognizes the merits on both sides, is willing to grapple with the hard technical stuff, but also has an ethical guiding light, maybe unlike Elena Kagan?
So this is the other main reason I wanted to write the book. I'm concerned about what you see, particularly on the right, where there are people who say, I really don't care about anything. I just want to stick to my principles and feel very proud about sticking to my principles. And I don't care if it actually results in any improvement for the country. And then you have people who say, all we should care about is winning. Who cares how we get there? We need to be ruthless as our enemies. And with Alito, I think you have this model going forward of how you can be and should be quite principled, but also pragmatic and prudential about applying those principles for maximum success for the republic that you want to help and the people you want to help. Everyone should be thinking of this as a model, whether they're in the legal profession or not.
There's an idea in kind of American society we've lost, that along with our pioneering spirit that we've unfortunately left a lot behind in earlier years, we've also stopped lionizing great American men and holding them to really high standards. And so when I see a book like this, and just for transparency's sake, of the little of it that I've been able to dive into so far, I'm enjoying seeing kind of the academic prowess, the intelligence, the skill, the wisdom, the character. That's excellent. But I think it's also worth reading this because it gives you a sense that we are still, as an American society, creating heroes. And for our kids, for our progeny, that is worth more than just about anything.
Well, again, thank you for seeing that. I remember Daniel Flynn, who's done a lot of biographies, was talking about how the left does a great job of memorializing all the work of their heroes. And the right just doesn't. But you need to know great men so that you can emulate them and so you can learn lessons from them. And it was why Carrie Severino and I wrote that Kavanaugh book. We knew what happened with Justice Thomas. Yep. They tried to tear him down after he was confirmed. We need to write the actual story, the actual history, before other people can, rewrite it and try to take away great accomplishments.
Oh, it's true. Oh, left-wing streets named after versus right-wing streets named after. It's like 10-1. I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we don't. Molly Hemingway, cannot recommend her and the Federalist enough. Alito, the justice who reshaped the Supreme Court and restored the Constitution. That link is in the description. Do not go without checking it out. All right, before we're just on our way out for the evening, I know it's 8:40 p.m. I do want to answer a couple of cool Mailtime questions because, it's the end of our week. But I did want to take a bit of time to kind of cover just a few things here from some of our dear folks. So first of all, a very kind super chat from Wow Life is Rough, $10, said, hey, why are jails and prisons labeling everybody as white on jail and prison rosters if they're obviously not white? It depends on the ethnic heritage. Believe it or not, whether or not you have a certain skin color, it is not a central play into your ethnicity. So for example, there's a huge group of people that is always left out of things who are by skin tone white, but then they are culturally and ethnically Hispanic. So it's there's a little of that in there, and then I'd probably need to see some of the individual situations. But again, to answer the question there, also, do I think that Kash Patel is going to win his defamation lawsuit against The Atlantic? I mean, two things. First of all, do I think it's going to go really, really far? I mean, he's already gotten the victory of The Atlantic changing the headline, which is a little bit of an admission of something a little bit wrong. But the argument that they're making that, well, some sources totally did tell us that he's a drunk and told us that he's missing in action and stuff, so therefore that means he did it or whatever. If it's an investigative reporting kind of piece, you are supposed to reach out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's director, the guy that's the subject of the article, and actually get an official statement. It's a common thing. So that kind of thing, very, very interesting for sure. Other questions that I did want to get a chance to answer here from YouTube member Francis P. Johnson. Why do we as kind of a policy here, why do we allow trolls in the chat? People that don't like us and that kind of, just kind of drop in to complain, things like that. Well, the answer to that is twofold. Number one, because we really only try to remove those who are violating kind of the YouTube community policies. None of you is required to agree with me on anything and everything at all. So, for example, I have complained about the way that Trump handled about half of the tariffs. Now, half of them I think he did correctly, and that they were instrumental in making some amazing leverage diplomacy options happen. Half of them, though, were from Peter Navarro, just permanent tariffs on like bananas from Madagascar, and they were retarded. And I called them that. And some of you in this very comment section said, you don't know what you're talking about, and I disagree. That's fine. You're more than welcome to say that. That's cool. That's fine. Some of you in the chat disagree with things I say throughout the show. Great. Totally fine. The troll kind of a thing, if you are just, coming in, you're like, boy, you MAGA Republicans are dumb and stupid. The reason that I do enjoy leaving them in the chat is because, number one, I love seeing people make fools of themselves. It's a hoot. Number two, it provides great engagement for the show. So when you comment in the live chat, you are a part of boosting the show's engagement. And so instead of, engaging with trolls, I like to, and I have this on Twitter. I have a couple of reply guys who, there's even a guy who has recorded a couple podcasts about me. Poor dude. Whatever. That's great engagement for me. That boosts me in the algorithm. And because I want the show to grow and be shown to, more people, hey, that's a really nice thing. So I've recommended this before. There was one night that you guys in the chat did this, and I laughed so hard and so long. My wife was asking me in bed before we shut off the lights and went to sleep. I was still laughing. There was one troll who'd just been sending the same message over and over. And you guys were thanking him aggressively to the point where every time he messaged, there were 800 people in the comments who were just thank you so much for stopping by and increasing engagement. And it upset the person more than people disagreeing with them. And I enjoy that. As the line goes, as Jason Hammer on 93 WIBC in Indianapolis taught me, who Bob Cavonian of Bob and Tom taught him, you say, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the engagement. Certainly do appreciate it. If you want to hate watch Tony Kinnett, dude, I don't even pleasure watch Tony Kinnett. I have never seen an episode of this show. why, if you hate me or you don't like it, again, as you saw with Wade Stotts, there's 100 different bearded conservative dudes who look exactly like me, or like Wade, looking slightly better. So there's your answer. That's kind of why we allow that. And if you don't like it, you're more than welcome to block them. Then you don't have to see their messages. So that's kind of our saying. Now, again, if you start throwing up a bunch of swears or like a bunch of slurs, or you start making ethnic or religious accusations, like if you use the name of Jesus Christ, who is my Lord and Savior, in like a defamatory and gross way, yeah, no, bye. So there's a little extra on that on top of that, but that's the standard that we follow. Also, copy and pasted spam junk. I don't care for that either. Go copy and paste crap elsewhere. That's what Facebook is for. There's one other question that I've received a couple of emails from and on today. The first time I was contacted about this was by Nour, now I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, N-O-U-R, and then it's Abdullah Rahman. She says, I really hope that Tony talks about the 12 girls that were about to be hanged for not wearing their hijab, and that the President of the United States said, well, don't hang them, send them to the United States. The reason I have not talked about that yet is because I'm still looking into the story. There are a couple of things that happened during the day that you'll notice I may not cover. And there are sometimes good reasons for it, and sometimes it's because there's way too much and I forget, or it just doesn't make it into the show notes because stuff is developing that needs to be covered right then and there. The long and short answer there, though, really, is I'm still waiting to hear back from one contact that I have in the region to just double check some aspects of the story. Now, do I agree that Trump did it and that Trump offered? Yes. I just feel that I should have a little more information. Sometimes I'm maybe a little over hesitant, but I'm also aware of a lot of other broadcasters in the space who permanently ruin their reputations by making a lot of unfounded accusations and speculations, and then they're wrong. And I really try not to do that to you guys. So that's kind of why I hadn't done so yet. Is Ilhan Omar hiding and trying to outrun her, like, her piracy, her fraud stuff? I think there's a little bit of that, yeah. Now, when Congress is called back into session, we don't do remote voting, so she will have to come back. I still think there's a considerable amount of momentum to actually get her to the point where, that kind of thing. You sold your life for a paycheck. See, that's the kind of troll stuff I'm talking about. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Ilhan Omar selling her life for a paycheck. No, there was some immigration fraud and incest that came first. So that kind of thing aside, here's a good one. From Wiggle McJiggles. First of all, excellent name. Unhappy, but an excellent name. So first of all, quote, the Republicans lied about a republic and lied about democracy. Do you see the oligarchy yet? I'm happy to answer questions that are adversarial. Do it all the time. It's my job during the day as the national correspondent for the Daily Signal. However, if you lead questions, and you'll see there are often a lot of questions that we get that are friendly questions, like from the right, that I also will ignore if they're leading questions. So if you establish the premise, you're like, so this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true. And now here, very down at the end is like a tiny question that's, I'm right, or you're a racist, right? I don't care for that crap. I don't care for it anywhere. I don't care for it whether it's to Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio, even if he botches answering the question. I don't care if it's to Trump. I don't care. Again, you saw this with PBS. You've said this, and are you going to like nuke stuff? Don't do that. Ask the question. Who knows the answer that you'll get? But ask the question. I don't like that. That's a cop-out. It kind of is a questioning kind of a pattern and procedure. So, that all said. Last question that I'm going to answer because it does, in fact, stroke my ego. From Kitty Be Good, what is the funniest hate comment that you've gotten, Tony? It's from a reply guy. It's not even from one of y'all. I'm so sorry to say. I hate to burst your bubble. But it is a favorite. There was a rumor. So I've had a couple of online guys, reply guys. Back when I did education reporting, like a lot of the people who hated me all came from Hamilton County, just outside of Marion County, in Indiana. So like the county right north of the main Indianapolis County is Hamilton. And it's like suburbs on steroids. And a lot of people from there despise me. So there was a rumor that was started from there because, again, like we saw earlier this evening with the new secretary or the acting secretary of the Navy, Hung Kao, who is 5'8", the Democrats are like, oh, he's so short because there's a picture of him standing next to Glenn Youngkin, who is, again, 6'7". The stupid Gen Z meme. So, you know, that picture. There was a rumor that was started that actually I'm like 4 foot tall. And that one amazed me. And the reason it amazed me and that I laughed about this for so long, there is all kinds of stuff that you can make fun of me for. All kinds of stuff. I've got some snaggle teeth. This one right here specifically is set back a little bit far. I'm sure you've noticed this. I sure have. This eye is sunk, no, this eye is a little bit lower than this one. You can go all out on different things that you can tease me and make fun of me for, by all means. You know, but my height, I am an easy 6'1", 6'2" on a good day. And I've been public speaking for a long time. If you're going to make up a rumor, again, you can make fun of me all day long. There's tons of stuff. There's tons of free content, by all means. But calling somebody who's in public a lot a height that's like easily provable, just saying that one just always made me crack up. Like, of all of them. And I actually did get a chance to talk to one of the reply guys and say, okay, so like why the dwarf rumor? And I didn't actually get an answer. And to this day, I'm actually really sad. I really wanted to know where it came from. Like, who decided one day, hey, Tony's like 3'2"? I mean, first of all, I think that sometimes people who are like the really, really short, like dwarf kind of stuff, dude, there's some exciting life stuff. I mean, you want to talk about paid informants, you could get the down low on the Wizard of Oz. Yeah, that's the next one for you there, SPLC. You can crack the Lollipop Guild while you're at it. So that's the funniest one that I've ever seen as far as like hate stuff. I don't know. There's just something about a rumor that when there's all this to make fun of and to tease, that you go after something that's not there. I don't know. There's just a fun one. And maybe, I don't know. One of those things. You kind of get used to it. I get hate mail all the time. And gonna level, some of it is so incoherent, I'm a little surprised. I don't know. Interesting stuff for sure. So those all said, hopefully you guys are, am I worried about rebutting Hoosiers? I'm not sure about rebutting Hoosiers. As a Hoosier, I'm always happy to rebut other Hoosiers. I don't know. I have no problem rebutting anybody Hoosiers anywhere. That's the fun of it. So that all said, have a wonderful weekend. Like I said, I will be speaking tomorrow at the Henry County, Indiana Lincoln Day dinner. And then after that, it's to DC for the White House Correspondents Association dinner. I cannot wait to see what Trump is going to say. The last time he was at one of these things was 2011, and Obama said, you're not going to be president ever. So I'm looking forward to that. So we will see you guys on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, here on dailysignal.com/YouTube. So you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Touch grass, spend time with your family, go to church, take care. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Y'all, take care.